The next market failure we're going to look at is threats to sustainability, also known as threats to common access resources. It's got a better name though. This is a historical name that was written about a few hundred years ago. And this problem is referred to as the tragedy of the commons. And come on, that's a way better name than threats to sustainability. So we'll talk about it that way. What we mean by this, what we're getting at is that in each individual decision, and remember in economics, we always talk about cost-benefit decisions. So when a decision is made on an individual action, a purchase, or really anything, if I decide whether I'm going to wake up and go to the gym, I'm thinking about what does it cost me, sleep, and what does it benefit me, and I make a decision based on that. Well, the problem with tragedy of the commons, what we mean by commons or common access resources, is that this is something that is available to lots of people, and you can't keep them from accessing that resource. So the oceans, the air, wide open spaces, things like that. Well, in these decisions or in the decision-making process, the individual is going to get 100% of the benefit. But the costs are going to be divided amongst everybody who shares in that common access resource. So what's going to happen is any cost-benefit decision is going to be skewed towards the benefit, because I'm thinking, what do I want to do? And I think about my benefits, of which I get all of the benefits. Okay, well then what are the costs? Well, the costs are divided amongst many other people. Therefore, the benefit is always going to win out, and I'm going to choose to consume, or do whatever decision I'm trying to make. So let me give you kind of a simple example, and then we'll talk about, where it's more real in economics. You often hear about people going out to eat and splitting the bill. So we're going to have Joe and Bob. They're going to go out to lunch, and they've decided beforehand, okay, we're both going to split the bill. If you decide to split the bill at the end, this wouldn't work, because it's got to be part of the decision-making process. Let's go ahead and say if they're not going to split the bill, and each one is just going to pay for what they consume. Let's say that each of them, they're happy with a hamburger and they'd rather not spend $14. So each of them would choose to buy just the hamburger for $10. And then obviously the overall bill would come to $20. Joe would pay his half, $10, not his half, what he bought, a hamburger, $10. Bob would pay for what he bought, a hamburger, $10, and that's that. If they've agreed to split the bill beforehand, however, watch what will happen. Joe thinks, well, my benefit of getting the steak is that it's a better quality product, it's a better meal, so my benefit is $14 worth of benefit. My cost, though, is only half of that, because I'm splitting it with Bob. Even if I know that Bob's likely to do the same thing, for that individual choice, it doesn't matter. Because even if I say, okay, well, Bob might buy the steak too, so I'm going to buy something more expensive, I still have to pay for his half of his steak, which I'm going to go, well, if that's true, well, then it's only going to cost me half of the difference here, $2 more. It's only going to cost me $2 more to have the steak as well. So I get $4 more of benefit for only $2. Well, that's a pretty easy decision to make. The benefit outweighs the cost, and what it's going to lead to is both of them will order the steak, and obviously the whole bill will come to $28 instead of $20, so they've overconsumed. Remember, they've overconsumed by definition. We said initially they would have both been happy with just the hamburger. By the way, when I say overconsume, I don't mean the amount of food, I mean the amount of resources they've spent, the money, to have their meal. So this is the problem, and again, it's irrelevant, even if both Joe and Bob know that this could happen, it's irrelevant because each individual decision is going to be affected by the common access resource. The common access resource there is we're both paying for the meal. So this is the tragedy of the commons, and let's talk about it in more realistic, what actually matters to economics. If we look at the atmosphere, each time a company thinks about how am I going to produce, remember one of those three questions of economics, how am I going to produce, they have to make a decision about how much, pollution they will control and how much they'll go ahead and release out into the atmosphere. Well, if they choose to pollute less, they get all of the costs. They have to pay all of those costs. Their benefits, though, are going to be reduced because they're not going to get all of the benefit of them not polluting, because if other factories around also still pollute, well, the air is going to be more or less, just as polluted as it was before. Likewise, so what's going to happen here is they're going to choose to pollute because, well, we get all the benefit of paying less money for the pollution or to produce more cleanly. We get all that benefit, and the cost to us isn't that great. Sure, we recognize that it makes it a bit more polluted, but you're not going to actually see a change from just one company or one factory doing that. Same is true of traffic, right? When we're looking at each person deciding, do I drive or do I take the bus or subway? Well, driving tends to be a much better option. I control when I leave. I control, I can drive right up to where I need to go, et cetera, et cetera. Now, some of you are thinking, wait a minute, that's not true. You don't get to drive up right where you are. You have to go to a parking lot next door. That's part of the tragedy of the commons. If there was only one car in the entire world and I owned it, and there's streets and all the good stuff that we associate with having cars, well, how great would that be? I could just drive anywhere I want, park right in front, everything would be really easy. But again, because everyone's going to make their decisions based on that same thought process, there's going to be a lot of cars, therefore we have traffic, therefore it's hard to find parking and things like that. Not to mention the pollution that goes along with that. I was trying to think of something not necessarily economic, and I thought of our very plugged-in culture that most of us, oh, sorry, hold on a second. Sorry, I just got a text I had to respond to. Anyway, that's part of the problem of our plugged-in culture. I think all of us, if we were to step back for a minute and decide, do we want a society where people have very little attention span, where people have a very hard time making it through a whole dinner or a conversation without stopping to check their phone and things like that? You see there's a lot of videos on YouTube that are kind of talking about this same thing, about how it would be better if we could all unplug a little bit. I think if we were to all step back, none of us really wants a world that looks that way, where people are walking around the city just staring at their smartphone all the time. But that's the world that we have. And again, there's a lot of tragedy in the commons of that me having my smartphone definitely makes my life much easier. But I don't think about the other costs that might be out there. It's not the exact same thing, so don't take this the wrong way. But our previous talk about demerit goods and the external costs that exist with demerit goods, it's not completely removed from the conversation that we're having here. Obviously, if I know all my costs, that's one thing, and tragedy of the commons can occur. If I don't know all my costs, if I don't see all my costs because they're external costs, that's going to make the problem even worse.